Right, Meliora.
Produce this.
This is my young sis, Meliora. Her vocabulary is a plethora. A stickler for grammar, she said with a stammer, the plural of forum is fora. Susie?
Oh.
There she sits, little Susie, my wife. And for certain, not trouble nor strife. After 35 years, we've turned into old dears. As a sentence, that's longer than life. Brian Granger. At Christmas, our friend Brian Granger, quite boldly ignoring the danger, flew in on a wire while playing a lyre and singing Away in a Manger. Trevor, a detective from Brattlesham Bay, said dejectedly last Christmas Day, I was hoping for hampers with caviar and champers, but only got Cadbury's milk tray.
Yes.
Copyright. Some of these need footnotes. Now, Kipper was brought in by the Prudential to drag them into the 21st century. He's very outspoken, is Kip, and likely to shoot from the hip. Though not deferential about the Prudential, he never abandoned the ship. That's the first lot. More to come later.
Yes,
on.
the more. It's like Strictly.
Ian Andrew. Ian said, my preferred morning treat is a bowl full of Quaker puffed wheat. This does not taste as good as I think that it should, but don't worry, I've got the receipt. In Westminster, young Tony James was up to his nautical games. He shouted out, KV, I'm getting the Navy to ferry me over the Thames.
Thank you very much.
David sadly can't be, well, David Oakley can't be with us, and he's been ill in one way or another over years, but he always bounces back, but unfortunately he bounced on the wrong day this time. He was coming up until 2 days ago, and then suddenly he had to say he couldn't come. Said the stoical David Oakley, while presenting his sample of pee, I've been having a look through a medical book, and I've had every illness bar 3. Margaret Andrew is ever so posh, and prepares the most beautiful nosh. When somebody said, the poor have no bread, she replied, let me make them brioche. Christopher Searle. He's a tall chap, is Christopher Searle, but never gets into a whirl. If he's in a small van, to get out, if he can, he has to roll up and unfurl. I've seen you doing it. One more. Louise. Said, my clever little young daughter Louise, who's an expert on choosing her cheese, I find upon l'évêque quite a pain in the neck, but adore camembert kills the breeze. Of course, pain in the neck is about N-E-Q-U-E.
Roger was feeling quite grim, with limericks full to the brim. So for better or worse, I constructed this verse that is written solely for him. I ask that everyone here drinking fruit juice or wine or just beer to raise up your glasses, your voices and arses. Give Rog a tumultuous cheer.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming huge distances at great expense to be here with us. It's absolutely wonderful that you've all done so. Thank you very, very much. And we must push on.
Yes, that's nice.
Oh, goodness me. It's a bit of a Trevor hat.
Oh, look at that!
Oh no, that is
Isn't
very,
that
very
beautiful?
wonderful.
That's lovely. Isn't that fabulous?
Have a look at yourself in the mirror.
Some of you here have asked why my name is Bar, given that my actual name is Meliora, and the fact is a little bit embarrassing, but I am the youngest of the family, so therefore Baby, which became Baba, which got shortened to Bar, and bar it has been ever since. My brother, my older brother, 3 years older than me, which is the exact right distance. It's short enough that he still wanted to play with me, but wide enough that he was always better at doing everything than I was. We had a tree in the back garden, the laburnum tree, and it had a fork in it. And by the time I could climb up into that fork, Roger was already into the second fork. By the time I could climb up to the second fork, he was already up to the wall and walking along it, and by the time I could walk along the wall, he'd lost interest. Gone on to something.
Gone to university.
Perhaps, yes. We grew up in a house in Kent, and it was that kind of typical house that all kindergarteners draw, whether they live in it or not. The one with 2 windows up, 2 windows down, and the door in the middle and a chimney with smoke coming out. And there was a path that ran around of the whole house. And my sister and brother used to love to push me or pull me in anything that was pushable or pullable. And the first thing was a big metal kind of tub thing, which I think they just pulled me around the lawn on that one because I was too young. But as soon as I could sit up independently, they pulled me around in this old blue truck, which to me was enormous, but I have a photograph of it, and in fact it's very small. And growing up in the war, of course, a lot of us here grew up in the war, and right after the war, there wasn't a lot. You had to make do with whatever you could get. And so where this little blue truck came from, I have no idea, but it was very cheaply made. And so very soon the wheels would fall off or the slats would break. And when you could no longer tell the slats from what was actually the truck, you know, because you didn't know which bit was which, I graduated, or I was graduated, to my mother's weeding basket, which was this little round thing of interwoven sticks, if you remember, and a little handle, and I could just see over the top of it. It was absolutely glorious. It was perfectly glorious. But I think my mother wanted the weeding basket back, and so we found the old pram in the shed, and that was the Cadillac of things to be pushed around the house in, because it didn't matter how fast they took the corner, it was so well balanced that it never tipped over. I mean, that was just heaven. But I think my mother must have realized that this was a very nice pram, and she probably sold it. So then I was graduated to the last vehicle I was pushed and pulled around. This one pushed was the wheelbarrow, which wasn't too bad because it had a big rubber wheel at the front, but they often took the corner too fast and the whole thing would tip. But again, it didn't matter because it was just so heavenly to be pushed and pulled. I didn't have to do anything. They did all the work. Lovely. Now, one consequence of living in Kent was that the German bombers, if they hadn't managed to get rid of all of their bombs in London, would hang on just a second.
Oh, it's just...
I'm sorry I'm late.
It's not.
Person from Porlock.
Tony.
Just come on in, Tony.
I'm so sorry I'm late.
We haven't missed a thing. We haven't missed a thing.
And I gather it's all been truly wonderful. I'm going to cross upstage a bit, because I know you are absolutely mid. Sorry to interrupt your work, madam.
The wheelbarrow.
Well, living in Kent and the bombs. We were never actually affected by any of the aeroplane bombs. But as my mother relates it, one evening she was writing a letter downstairs and there was a massive explosion with absolutely no warning whatsoever. And she realized that all her children were upstairs, rushed to the bottom of the stairs, and has never been so relieved to see 3 children absolutely black with soot, noses running, cuts, but nothing serious, and crying, so that she knew we were all alive. But as soon as the dust settled, both figuratively and actually, apparently my brother and sister rushed out to where the V2 rocket had fallen. It was a very new rocket that didn't whistle when it came down. And luckily it had fallen right into the middle of the river, which was called the Medway, but the local people called it the mudway because it was so full of mud, and it had fallen right into the river, into the mud, and so nobody actually was killed with this V2 rocket. And Roger and Jenny proceeded to pick up all the bomb bits. And again, in the war, you didn't have toys. You made do with whatever you could get. But unfortunately, they could only hold on to those bomb bits for 24 hours because the next day the army arrived and said, we need the bomb bits back because we need to reconstruct whatever this strange rocket was. And my mother, I'm not sure I should be proud of this, but she stood by her children and only gave back the bits that she thought were absolutely essential to reconstructing the rocket. And so to this day, in fact, I have the bomb bits, and they were kept in this black ebony box with ivory inlay and a velvet inside, and the bomb bits, very incongruous. And we would use this when we played our wonderful games with our toys. We didn't have there was one Queen Dora, one very meager kind of teddy bear that was called Teddy Cooper, and then there was Prince Teddy, the hero of every story, and I think you might even still have Prince Teddy.
So sadly.
I know that you did have him for quite a while. But there were a lot of processions and medals needed for the games that we played, the stories that we told, and of course the bomb bits would come out and be the medals for these marvelous occasions, which perhaps was a little incongruous. And as you heard from Jenny, we did the most wonderful productions, back garden productions, and the only people that could come and see them were my parents and my godparents. But they were lavish. And the most lavish, as Jenny mentioned on her recording, was Jack the Giant Killer. I mean, it was amazing. We, and I use we very liberally, created a beanstalk made out of rope, and there were periwinkles sewn into the rope. And at the appropriate time, when Jack, me, threw out the beans, Roger, behind a curtain, would pull up the beanstalk, and up this periwinkle beanstalk would rise. And when it was time to cut it down, of course, Roger was the giant because he always played the lead, and I always got the best part, and Jenny was the director of everything. Jenny would cut the periwinkle, and it would break. So that was, I think, our best performance that we ever did.
Very well.
But I don't know, does anyone here have an older brother? Yes? Well, I don't know about you, but it wasn't all plain sailing. Because let's face it, a younger child needs to have the corners knocked off them, right? And so Roger just did it out of the goodness of his heart to make me feel better. We used to have these conker fights, and mysteriously he always won. And years later he told me he would put the conker in the oven, which makes it a lot harder, and so of course it would split my conker. And we also had an apple competition at apple time, and whoever could find the best apple that had fallen from the tree, the rosiest, the unbruisedness of the apple. And again, mysteriously, he always won. But he told me again years later that he would get up at 7 o'clock and go out there. I don't know if he picked the apple or if he picked it off the ground, but it was always better than my apple. But I didn't care, because he chose me to play with. It was me that he was playing the tricks on. And then one day he told me that he was going to give me the best treat, the best savory treat. And he took me to the dining room, opened up the cupboard, and took out a sugar lump and put salt on top of it. Now, I have to just backtrack to yesterday, because I had a very interesting conversation with Lulu, who told me that she loves sweet things with salt. But I have to say, when I put it in my mouth, my taste buds exploded. The sweet one said, "What is this salt?" And the other one said, "What is this sugar?" And I spat the whole thing out, because it was the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted in my life. And perhaps because Roger was feeling sorry for me, he said, "Stay there, I'm going to bring you a magical drink." And he did. He brought me lime juice. And you know how that lime juice, when it's put in the water, it kind of swirls around a little bit? But on top of the glass was this layer of froth. And he said, "It's a secret." and you must not know how I do the lime juice. And it was delicious. I have to say, it was absolutely delicious. And he would provide this lime juice for me every now and then and said, you cannot see me make it. And again, years later, he told me that all he did was put his finger over the tap so it would squirt and form this froth. And again, I wish he hadn't told me because he wanted to be magical and mysterious. So growing up with Roger was just, it was magical. Growing up with Roger was magical. Every day was filled with adventure. It was fun. It was educational. I just can't tell you because he was always better at doing everything than I was. And he was my hero. And to this day, he's still my hero. And wait, I have something for you. I have a little PowerPoint presentation for you. Of everything.